Okay, so we've talked all week about the Shema, and obviously we can keep going for weeks about the Shema. So we'll wrap up the Shema today. We'll finish one final thought, and then next week, God willing, we'll turn our attention to the Amida. So we've talked about Shema, the meaning of Shema, the meaning of Yisrael, Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem, Echad. Yesterday we finished discussing God's oneness, what it means that God is one, that He's not the only God, but He's the only existence. And so in a situation where we have the appearance of multiple existences, many existences, right? We live we're in a created being as created people, yet we say God is one. So Echad implies that there's this perceived otherness, and yet it's all part of God's oneness. And that's the meaning of the word Echad, one. And I talked about this also earlier in the week, that Echad, the word Echad is made up of three letters here. Aleph, which is the numerical value of 1, Ches, which is the numerical value of 8, and Dalid, which is 4. So Echad, Aleph, is the one God that then needs to be manifest in Echad, the 7 heavens and earth, and Dalid, the 4 corners of the earth. In other words, the idea of the Shema is to bring that awareness of God's oneness into the world. This is partly also why this is the seminal prayer of Judaism, and why this is the prayer that was on the lips of the martyrs as they were dying for God. And rather than denounce or renounce their connection to God, they reaffirmed their connection with God with this statement, because this is a statement of God's ultimate oneness, and nothing else exists like God. That's also why when we say the Shema, so the Mishnah tells us that we should be Mayrich be'echad. We should elongate the pronunciation of the word Echad. So you see, sometimes you go to shul, you'll see people say Echad. You'll hear people, going on a long Echad rant, and that's based on the teaching of the sages that you should lengthen the pronunciation of the word Echad. So you should say it Echad. Don't slur the Ches and pronounce the Dalid. But what is the idea of prolonging the Echad? And by the way, the sages say whoever prolongs Echad lives a prolonged life. The life is prolonged. What's the connection? This idea, because Echad is about bringing that awareness of God, that oneness of God, into our reality. So that's what it means to prolong it. It doesn't mean to stand there shouting, like the, remember those old, what was those Budweiser commercials? Those old commercials, what's up? And there's a whole commercial just, anyway, you know what I'm talking about? Anyway, so there are people, you go to shul and it sounds like that's what's going on when people, thank you, Bruce, I see, knows what I'm talking about. Sometimes it sounds like that's what people are doing when they're saying their Echads. But what it means is, yes, we say it also, we prolong the pronunciation, but it's really the reflection, the meaning of it, to bring that oneness, that awareness that we have when we say the Shema into our reality, into this world. That's also why when people say Echad, you'll notice there's a practice people have to shake their head in all directions, because they're being mindful of this idea that it's bringing God's oneness into the 7 heavens, into earth, and into the 4 corners of the earth. So you turn your head to all 4 corners, right? So that's part of that meditation. One other thought about the Echad, you see I mentioned that the Shema, at this verse, you'll notice that the Ayin and the Dalet are big. And that's how it's written in the Torah scroll. There's a large Ayin and a large Dalet. And I mentioned that it's aid. If you just look at Ayin and Dalet, it's aid, which means witness, because we bear witness to God. But if you read it backwards, it's Da, to know, right? Because it's not enough to think about these things, to believe these things, we have to know them. And Shema is a deep meditation and contemplation where we have to come not to believe in God or to believe in God's oneness. We have to actually endeavor to try and understand it, to know God. Okay, there's a Chassidic teaching on the letter Dalid here, the big Dalid. So there's Chassidim that would say the Dalid looks like a hammer. And the reason is, that the idea is that the Dalid, we have to bang that idea that oneness of God it seems counterintuitive. We seem so resistant to it. It needs to be something that we have to knock into our heads. So that's why you have the big Dalid to say, knock it into your head. One final thought on the Shema. So the Zohar says on the Shema that this whole statement is true, and it's emet, it's truth, and it is the mystery of truth. So it's true, all of this is true, and it's the mystery of truth. What does that mean? So bear with me. It's a teaching from the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, who we know is a great Kabbalist. So he says like this. There's a verse in the prophets that says, Ani Rishain, Ba'ani Acharein, Umi Ba'alodai Ein Elokeinu. I am the beginning, I am the end, and aside from me, there's no God. That's a statement in the prophets, right? So he says, Ani Rishon v'Ani Achrein. I am the beginning, I am the end. Ani, I, meaning God as he is beyond even names. That is a reference to the two names of God, the Yud Kei Vav Kei that you see in the Shema. So you see here, right? Yud, well, we talked about why it says Yud Yud in our Siddur, but this is Yud Kei Vav Kei, the first time God's name appears, and this is the second time, right? So you have the beginning, right? Ani Rishon, that's the first Hashem. Ani Acharon, that's the second Hashem, right? The last Hashem. And in the middle, and Elokim is the same as Elokeinu, right? The same name of God. Mibalade, aside from me, there's nothing. So there's not, in other words, there's nothing before me, there's nothing after me, and in between, there's nothing. Ani Rishon v'Ani I'm beginning, I'm the end, and aside from me, there's nothing, meaning even in the middle. So we see this, that's a reference to that verse. What does that have to do with truth? So he says, this is true. Ani Rishon v'Ani when you say that God is the beginning and the end, and he's the middle, that's truth. Why is that truth? What does that have to do with emet, specifically emet? If you look in the alphabet, so the alphabet, there are 22 letters of the alphabet, of the Hebrew alphabet, plus 5 final letters of the alphabet, right? So like you have a final nun and a final tzaddik, a final pei. So you have 22 letters plus 5. So you have 27 Hebrew letters of the alphabet. These 27 letters, what's the first letter? Is the letter Aleph. What's the last letter? The letter Taf. And what's the middle letter? Meaning the 14th letter, exactly in the middle of the alphabet of 27. What's the middle? Is Mem. Aleph, Mem, Taf, spell the word Emet. Truth is something that goes through everywhere. Truth is consistent. When somebody starts to lie, you can start punching holes in their story. They have to start keeping track of what's going on. We have some lawyers here, right? When you tell the truth, it's the truth. If it's the truth in the beginning, it's the truth in the end, it's the truth in the middle. You can't punch holes in the truth if you're telling the truth. So truth is consistent. It runs from the beginning to the end, the middle. Wherever you're going to poke it, it's going to be truth. And that's why the word emet is embedded in the alphabet, Aleph, Mem, Taf, exactly, beginning, middle, end, consistently all the way through. So what does that have to do? Ani Rishon, Ani Acharon, Umibalada, Ein Elokim, beginning, end, and beside from me, there's nothing, even in the middle, meaning God is true all the way through all of reality, from the beginning to the end and through the middle. What's the mystery of truth that the Zohar is alluding to? That's truth. All of this is truth. What's the mystery of truth? So the Rebbe's father says like this. If you look at the Hebrew, these 3 words, Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem, right? Hashem, right? We're saying Shema Yisrael, Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. So take these 3 names of God here in the Shema. The first letter of the first name of Hashem is Yud. The numerical value is 10. Elokeinu, the first letter is Aleph, that's 1. And the second Hashem, also the first letter is Yud, that's another 10. So that is a total of 21, right? 21 is the numerical value of one of God's names. Which name? Who knows? The name Ehyeh. It's a name that only appears really once in the Torah. The name Ehyeh. I will be what I will be, right? We're familiar with that story. I will be what I will be. I am what I am. Anyway, that name of God, Ehyeh. So God says to Moses, Ehyeh, what's my name? Moses asks, what's your name? What should I tell them? And God says, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. I am that I am. So it's Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. In other words, it's Ehyeh times Ehyeh. The word Ehyeh, that name of God, the numerical value is 21. And if you say Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, so 21 times 21, what do you get? What's 21 times 21? Anybody? 441, which is the gematria of Emet. So we see Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem, that is Emet, and that is the mystery of Emet in the Shema, the truth of God's oneness. Okay, so hopefully you're all able to follow that. We'll finish with today's Tanya. The Alter Rebbe says in today's Tanya that, to remember already the Tanya, what do you say in today's Tanya? That he continues talking about this level of, just as there are 2 levels of fear, higher fear and lower fear, there are also 2 levels of love of God, higher love and lower love. What's the difference between